Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Now, we're taking a break from our first stage poetry on Fridays this series, so I'm glad to include poetry here on Thursdays as I read through and discuss some of the poetry in The Lord of the Rings. Now, so far this series, we've looked at the many versions of The Road Goes Ever On, we've looked at the Other Walking Song, the Elven Hymn to Elbereth, and last week, 3 fun Hobbit tunes, albeit with the last one set to a Dwarven melody. Now, I know I left off last week mentioning another Hobbit song with an unfortunate accident, but I'll get to that in a bit. You'd think that maybe I'd tackle some of Tom Bombadil's songs, but let's be honest, his stuff pretty much needs its own series. So I'm actually skipping Tom this time around, pulling a Peter Jackson. But before we get to the merry old inn in Bree and Frodo's unfortunate singing moment, there's a terrifyingly creepy poem we need to read first. Now, for this, we certainly want some more creepy context. Frodo had been captured, hearing a voice deep and cold that seemed to come out of the ground, telling him, "I am waiting for you." After being gripped by something stronger and colder than iron, he passed out, and when he woke up, he knew he was in a barrow taken by a barrow wight. The darkness gave way to a pale greenish light, and he could see Sam, Pippin, and Merry dressed in white with a long sword laid across their 3 necks. Then we read. Suddenly a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves. Grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while, the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart, he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the Dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. Now, even the words used to describe the sound before the verse are of the same emptiness and hate that the verses imply. Words like railing, bereaved, cursing, hungered. This is a seriously dark and terrifying moment, and it may not be the first time Tolkien ever thought of something like this. Let's go back to something from the Lay of Leithian, an orc oath of all things, and see some of the similarities. Death to light, to law, to love, cursed be moon and stars above. May darkness everlasting old, that waits outside in surges cold, drown Manwë, Varda, and the sun. May all in hatred be begun, and all in evil ended be, in the moaning of the endless sea. Now, in both cases, a very dark future is envisioned, a cold, dead world ruled over by the Dark Lord. Now, that segment was actually a little longer than I thought it would be, but it's still too short for a Third Age Thursday, so I want to continue with a happier moment. Frodo, in the common room of the Prancing Pony Inn. The folk want a song. Come on now, master, sing us something we haven't heard before. And Frodo obliges, singing a ridiculous song that Bilbo had been rather fond of, and indeed rather proud of, for he had made up the words himself. There is an inn, a merry old inn beneath an old grey hill, and there they brew a beer so brown that the Man of the Moon himself came down one night to drink his fill. The ostler has a tipsy cat that plays a 5-stringed fiddle, and up and down he runs his bow, now squeaking high, now purring low, now sawing in the middle. The landlord keeps a little dog that is mighty fond of jokes. When there's good cheer among the guests, he cocks an ear at all the jests and laughs until he chokes. They also keep a horned cow, as proud as any queen, but music turns her head like ale, and makes her wave her tufted tail and dance upon the green. And oh, the rows of silver dishes and the store of silver spoons. For Sunday there's a special pair, and these they polish up with care on Saturday afternoons. The Man in the Moon was drinking deep, and the cat began to wail. A dish and a spoon on the table danced, the cow in the garden madly pranced, and the little dog chased his tail. The Man in the Moon took another mug, and then rolled beneath his chair, and there he dozed and dreamed of ale, till in the sky the stars were pale, and dawn was in the air. Then the ostler said to his tipsy cat, the white horses of the moon, they neigh and champ their silver bits, but their master's been and drowned his wits, and the sun'll be rising soon. So the cat on his fiddle played hey diddle diddle, a jig that would wake the dead. He squeaked and sawed and quickened the tune, while the landlord shook the man in the moon. It's after 3, he said. They rolled the man slowly up the hill and bundled him into the moon, while the horses galloped up in rear and the cow came capering like a deer, and a dish ran up with a spoon. Now, quicker the fiddle went diddle-dum-diddle, the dog began to roar. The cow and the horses stood on their heads, the guests all bounded from their beds and danced upon the floor. With a ping and a pong, the fiddle strings broke, the cow jumped over the moon, and the little dog laughed to see such fun, and the Saturday dish went off at a run with the silver Sunday spoon. The round moon rolled behind the hill as the sun raised up her head. She hardly believed her fiery eyes, for though it was day, to her surprise, they all went back to bed. Now, despite the pacing of that, I am nearing the end of the episode, but I want to tell you something about this fun bit of verse. It's a revision of a poem that Tolkien wrote, which was published in a journal in 1923, called The Cat and the Fiddle, a nursery rhyme undone and its scandalous secret unlocked, and republished as The Man in the Moon Stayed Up Too Late in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. Now, of course, near the end, it becomes clear that this is based on the nursery rhyme Hey Diddle Diddle. Now, Tolkien emphasizes this by saying before Frodo sings that only a few words of it are now remembered. Now, this idea, fleshing out the original full version of a poem that we only have bits of now, is an example of something that we see in philology when a word has an asterisk in front. It means the word has never been recorded itself, but it must have existed, essentially reconstructing an original from what comes after. Now, Tom Shippey talks about this in The Road to Middle-earth, and I'm going to end this long episode with a reading from there. What they do is to provide a narrative and semi-rational frame for the string of totally irrational non-sequiturs, which we now call nursery rhymes. How could the cow jump over the moon? Well, it might if the moon were a kind of vehicle parked on the village green while its driver had a drink. If one assumes a long tradition of idle children repeating thoughtless tales and increasing confusion, one might think that poems like Tolkien's were the remote ancestors of the modern rhymes. They are asterisk poems. They also contain, at least in their early versions, hints of mythological significance. The man in the moon who fails to drive his chariot while mortals panic and his white horses champ their silver bits, and the sun comes up to overtake him. Folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. We're going to continue looking at the poetry in The Lord of the Rings for the rest of Series 7 with a look at a riddle about a coming king and a song about a fallen king. Check out patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus weekly episode, and more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for another wonderful guest on Fandom Friday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.